It was electrifying in the room. The 117th Holy Convocation at Kojic drew thousands of believers. However, nobody was prepared for what followed. Bishop Talbert Swan took the mic amid fervent prayer and serious contemplation, and what he said rocked the internet and the Christian community. Sin was not rebuked by him. The world wasn't called out by him. He criticized YouTubers. This created an online firestorm of truth, tension, and passion that continues to reverberate today, because this was a warning, not merely a lecture. It was also intimate. As one of the biggest Pentecostal groups in the world, the Church of God in Christ's Holy Convocation has been a time of renewal, unity, and rebirth for more than a century. Thousands of people travel from all over the country to participate every November in the hopes of experiencing the power, hearing the word, and seeing something truly remarkable. However, the 117th Convocation this year was not solely recognized for the worship or the sermons. It was recalled for a brief time that provoked a national dialogue, and not in the way most people anticipated. Known for his unreserved audacity and incisive social criticism, Bishop Talbert Swan rose at the stage and gave a speech that attracted millions of people inside and beyond the church. Neither political leaders nor even common sinners were the target of his remarks. They were specifically directed at Christian YouTubers, a rapidly expanding internet community. Swan didn't hold back in a time when everyone has a platform and every sermon has the potential to go viral. He criticized what he called online rumors, self-styled prophets, and content producers that take advantage of church turmoil to get views. His voice seemed weary rather than resentful. He sounded both like a man irritated with the exposing culture that has taken over some sections of the Christian internet and like a shepherd protecting his flock. The energy of the crowd changed, and you could feel it. Some clapped in support and nodded in accord. Others sat motionless, unsure of the direction this was taking. It was a real, raw, and tense moment, because YouTubers weren't the only target of Bishop Swan's criticism. It had to do with the church's reputation, the breakdown of confidence, and the spiritual conflict being waged in public. But it wasn't simply what he said that made this moment so explosive. It was the reaction of the internet thereafter. The narrative then takes a surprising turn at that point. Like all holy convocations, the 117th had started off the same way. The choir's soaring vocals, the weight of expectation hanging thick in the air, and a sea of believers filling the enormous church. This revered occasion brings together some of the most influential Pentecostal voices each year. It's a celebration of faith, tradition, and spiritual rejuvenation, attended by both young preachers and seasoned bishops. However, something was different this year. Although there was a lot of excitement, there was an unsettling undertone, as though the church itself were at a turning point. Before the event, social media was already bustling with activity. For weeks, videos, analysis, and criticism of church leadership had been making the rounds on the internet. Once a ministry tool, YouTube has turned into a battleground where preachers, prophets, and even members of the pews argue, analyze, and occasionally disparage the church in the name of exposing the truth. Therefore, there was already tension in the air when Bishop Talbert Swan took the stage, even if nobody anticipated how blunt his message would be. He spoke calmly, yet authoritatively to start. He spoke with the distinct tone of someone who had seen too much and was fed up with acting as though nothing was wrong. He looked around the audience and remarked, "Everyone's got a microphone now. Everyone has an opinion about the church, a camera and a channel. But let me tell you something. Just because you talk about the church doesn't mean you belong to it." The assembly erupted. He wasn't kidding, but there were a few giggles and some apologies. His determination was evident in every phrase as his voice became more powerful. He went on, "There are people creating platforms based on the suffering of the saints, and converting ministry experiences into content that can be sold. People who don't attend church, serve others, or pray have all the criticism directed at those who do." The audience was no longer laughing. They were paying attention. A few gave a nod of agreement, Others shuffled in their chairs uneasily. The reality was sinking in. The audience's expressions ranged from conviction to caution as the cameras panned across them. They were aware of who he was referring to: the explosion of church-related commentary channels on TikTok and YouTube. Some of these authors had amassed sizable fan bases by analyzing sermons, revealing scandals, and attacking church authorities. Some people acted honorably, others did it to gain power. Although he didn't have to, Bishop Swan chose not to mention names. The message was grasped by all. His tone sharpened as he leaned closer to the microphone. Let me assist a few of you. You cannot destroy someone else's ministry in order to develop your own. God's kingdom cannot be established by eliminating his people on the internet. Discrimination isn't that. It's disrespectful. Applause and a few shouts of agreement erupted around the sanctuary. Not everyone, though, was applauding. His remarks were viewed by some as a challenge, an unsettling mirror held up to a new generation of online preachers who thought they were holding powerful people responsible. This is what caused this moment to be so explosive, because Bishop Swan wasn't merely chatting online with random people. He was addressing a developing conflict between the platform and the pulpit. He said, "We wonder why the world no longer takes us seriously. We have saints who spend more time watching gossip channels than studying the Bible. We have people who chase controversy rather than Christ." His comments reverberated around the hall like thunder. His tone was one of conviction and profound regret, the kind that results from witnessing the commercialization of something sacred. The room was quiet by the time he completed that section. While some sat silently, taking in every word, others clapped and others sobbed. Bishop Swan may not have realized at the time that his own sermon would soon become the next social media sensation, the very thing he cautioned against, because the online firestorm started as soon as clips of his rebuke appeared on YouTube. However, not everyone agreed with him, so what followed was even more unexpected. While some vehemently defended him, others charged that he was attempting to stifle responsibility inside the church. The actual argument started there. It soon became personal. Clips of Bishop Talbert W. Swan's speech were all over by the following morning. YouTube, Instagram Reels, TikTok, and Twitter. Strong views, dramatic subtitles, and little samples were all over every platform. Some video merely featured a brief excerpt of his rebuke, enough to evoke strong feelings but insufficient to convey his entire meaning. Others were altered to appear far more combative than they actually were. The headlines started to take shape in a matter of hours. At the COGIC convocation, Bishop publicly criticizes YouTubers. Online preachers are exposed by Talbert Swan. The Bishop of Kick chastises content producers for leveraging the church. The Holy Convocation had become a popular topic on the internet. Almost immediately, religious commentary YouTubers, the same ones Bishop Swan had alluded to in passing, began to reply. The church is terrified of accountability, as evidenced by certain videos that were released with titles like "So Bishop Swan thinks he can silence the truth. This is the reason." "He's right," said others in support of him. Instead of encouraging togetherness, too many people are making money off of church conflict. The comment sections turned into battlefields. Those who were fed up with seeing hallowed places transformed into public spectacles and thought Bishop Swan was defending the church's holiness were on one side. Content makers, on the other hand, contended that the church had lost credibility by avoiding problems and instead hiding behind titles. Millions of watchers were attempting to determine who was correct somewhere in the middle. The digital pulpit's rise. In actuality, Bishop Swan wasn't the only thing at stake in this moment. It has to do with something far more significant: a change in culture within Christianity itself. YouTube has subtly evolved into a new form of pulpit within the last 10 years. From ordained bishops to regular Christians with a camera in conviction, it offered everyone a voice. What was formerly contested in private churches was now being streamed, shared, and discussed globally. Transparency, according to a new generation of digital ministers, was the new way to communicate the truth. They viewed themselves as reformers who called out injustice, exposed hypocrisy, and demanded integrity from people in positions of authority. Traditional authorities, however, witnessed chaos, disdain, and devastation. And that evening, Bishop Talbert Swan, who was renowned for taking strong stands on social justice, appeared to draw a line. He wasn't only speaking to online detractors, he was standing up for what he considered to be holy order. Accountability, not algorithms, must be the foundation of ministry. A flurry of responses. Reaction films started to proliferate in a matter of days. By replaying Bishop Swan's speech frame by frame and adding commentary, sarcasm, or amusement, some creators broke down every word he uttered. Bishop Swan himself did not back down, but others sat in silence, clearly rattled, saying things like, "Maybe he's right. Maybe we've lost the reverence that used to define the church." He reaffirmed his position on his official social media accounts, noting that the purpose of social media should be to uplift rather than to destroy. He was clear that he had nothing against YouTubers. He objected to people amusing themselves in the church. Nevertheless, the boundaries had been established. Voices were categorized on the internet. There were those who supported Bishop Swan and those who opposed him, and a deeper aspect of the contemporary church was exposed by this division: the conflict between the digital generation and the old guard. We don't have bishops in our studios, but we do have platforms, and platforms reach people too, one YouTuber said, while another retorted, "Yes, but platforms without accountability are just noise." The discussion had progressed beyond a single speech and had turned into a mirror reflecting the sectarian divisions within the faith community over perception, power, and purpose. Bishop Swan's words struck a chord because they revealed something many believers had subtly sensed for years: that the church was losing its core. While some aimed to preserve its image, others sought to reveal its wounds. The emotional undercurrent that ran through all the arguments and commentary was something more human, a shared hurt. In testimonies posted following his lecture, there were tears. One young creator stated, "I started my channel because I love the church, not because I hate it." Both felt they were standing up for what they believed to be the truth. However, you cannot remain mute when you witness misfortune. The intricacy is in the statement made by another elder in the congregation who was later interviewed. "I miss the days when correction came through love, not likes." Despite the fact that their languages had altered, both sides were speaking from conviction. For a generation, the pulpit was the source of truth. It was uploaded in 1080p for the following one. This is what caused this to be so explosive. Both sides felt misrepresented, yet neither wanted to be misinterpreted. Something unexpected occurred as the online conflagration intensified. Bishop Swan's censure heightened the conversation rather than silenced it. More individuals started watching these religious stations out of interest rather than derision. They were curious as to what kind of content had sparked this kind of response. Paradoxically, the uproar helped several YouTubers acquire thousands of additional subscribers. But a more profound query accompanied that increased focus. The next chapter of this story would be defined by this question: was Bishop Swan correct? Was YouTube turning into a spiritual battleground? Yes. Or was it just the modern church's new frontier for telling the truth? What transpired during the convocation itself would alter the entire plot, which is when the story takes an even more dramatic turn. It took time for the storm to subside. The Kojic 117th Holy Convocation, which is typically a time of prayer, worship, and unity, was being analyzed online for days as a political event. The headlines that ought to have been about revival instead focused on reprimand. However, as things began to calm down, Bishop Talbert Swan spoke once more, but this time his words were calm and purposeful, bearing the weight of both authority and introspection, rather than coming from a podium resounding with cheers. Bishop Swan made an important clarification in his message. He wasn't criticizing creators or YouTube. He demanded responsibility and truth that was expressed with love rather than mockery. He stated, "There's a difference between calling out sin and tearing down saints. There's a difference between correction and clout chasing. God didn't call us to go viral. He called us to be faithful. It was a small yet potent change. It also reframed the entire controversy for many. Behind the scenes, the church reacts. The leaders of COGIC were talking to themselves. Bishop Swan's reprimand was viewed by some as essential, serving as a reminder that social media has eroded religious boundaries. Others were concerned that, despite its good intentions, the message may turn off the same generation the church was attempting to reach. Later, Bishop Brandon Porter, who had also stood on stage during the convocation, took an indirect approach to the matter. He encapsulated the issue in one of his post-event interviews when he remarked, "We can't let digital platforms define our theology, but we also can't ignore that God can use any platform to reach his people." At this point, the church was torn between tradition and change. Respect, hierarchy, and order were important to the elder generation. Transparency, communication, and online presence were appreciated by the younger generation. Both sides asserted that they were engaged in a battle for the truth. In a way, YouTubers weren't the only people criticizing the church. It was a conflict of callings, facing itself. The convocation's censure, in many respects, exposed a deeper aspect of ministry in the contemporary age. A new calling was beginning to emerge, one that didn't ask for a pulpit, robe, or even a structure. All you need is an internet connection, a camera, and a conviction. YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok were being used as evangelism tools by young believers in America and abroad. They were reaching audiences that the Orthodox Church could only imagine by fusing theology with reaction films, preaching with commentary, and truth-telling with popular subjects. Those who would gladly browse sermons on their phones but would never enter a sanctuary. However, it was still unclear if this was a genuine ministry or merely amusement. Many YouTubers felt misunderstood when Bishop Swan spoke out against them because they believed they were preaching truth to power, just like pastors had always done. However, the church believed that their message was not the problem, it was the approach. Anyone might become a voice of truth overnight if there was no monitoring, ordination, or responsibility. Furthermore, influence might turn hazardous once millions of people start to listen. The gap in emotions. Social media was divided for days. You could see the two worlds clashing as you browse through your feed. Footage of Bishop Swan's ferocious speech juxtaposed with heartfelt remarks from producers who felt personally disparaged. In their testimonials, some influencers said that church leaders had damaged them by silencing their voices, and they saw Swan's message as part of that trend. While many long-standing churchgoers voiced fatigue, others broke down on video, stating, "I don't hate the church. I'm just trying to hold it accountable because I still believe in it." They believed that viral scandals and popular hashtags were eroding their religion. "If we only post about the pain, we won't be able to heal," one lady wrote on Twitter. The emotional exhaustion of a whole generation of believers who were weary of conflict but desperate for the truth was encapsulated in that tweet alone.